Hello, I'm Mark Dynamix, and it gives me deep joy to welcome you to this special presentation of the Electronique podcast. We're going back to 1990 and the release of the Happiness album by seminal and inspirational group The Beloved. Released in February 1990, the album was the studio work of Jon Marsh and Steve Waddington, being one of the first albums to fuse house and pop music. The album spawned 4 chart singles and reached number 14 on the UK albums chart at the time. For the album's re-release, 30 years on in 2020, a special edition is now available on vinyl, CD and digital, encompassing a newly remastered print of the album, plus a bonus selection of demos and unheard songs. From The Beloved, it's Jon Marsh. How are you, Jon?
I'm okay, Mark. It's a lovely sunny day down here in southwest England.
Well, it's 2020 now, and here in Melbourne, we're pretty much in house arrest due to coronavirus. How are things looking over there in Devon in the UK right now, where you are?
Well, obviously, we've been through that once as a nation. Not very well handled, not very well. Initially well observed, and then I don't know how much the British news cycle gets played over there, but we've been horrendously let down at senior level here. So there's a tipping point at which, when the government's senior advisor decided that the rules didn't apply to him, that the rest of the country felt, justifiably started to follow suit. And there you go. That's kind of where you have it.
There's plenty of that happening over here as well. But I did see on the news that the UK government is giving people 80% of their income. That's certainly not happening here in Australia. Is that correct?
Yes, there's a furlough scheme. That's been quite common for a lot of the Western European countries, certainly. But I don't know. I mean, what I know of the Australian situation is that your incidence rate and your management of it was superior, because obviously geographically each state managed to lock itself down independently, didn't it? So would that be beholden to central government now, or would that be a state thing?
It's pretty much federal, but every state is having its own set of issues.
So there's no help for businesses at all?
Oh, there is, and there is for sole traders like myself, for instance. There is assistance, but it barely covers rent, and when all of your other income is dashed, it makes things pretty difficult. I
didn't personally have experience of it, because what I do and my income stream is kind of certainly not suffering when people are in lockdown listening to music, without being too blasé about it. How people begin to emerge from that, I don't think anyone knows yet. We're still treading water, because we don't know whether we're going to get a second wave yet.
Yeah, well, we've had the second wave down here in Victoria. We had 800 cases just today, 800 cases. So it's blowing up again, and everyone's on edge at the moment. It's not too good at all.
What are there specific epicenters where people think the spreading is taking place?
Well, mainly nursing homes in Victoria, but people have crossed the border into New South Wales, which has taken it into Sydney, and then of course all of the other states have locked off their borders to Victoria and New South Wales.
But is it breaking out into the general population? And I'm not trying to be in any shape or form denigrating this, because we've obviously had massive things. But what I'm saying is, in terms, we've had things like meat processing plants and things like that, where people are in close proximity to each other, and mad spread and contagion.
Jon, can you believe it's now been 25 years since we last spoke on the phone, when I interviewed you just on the cusp of the release of the X album? Where have the years gone?
I know. Well, but my oldest child is 20 this November, so I know roughly where some of it's gone. At least we can tell. Obviously, when I last saw you, I was working with Helen at that incarnation of the band, and we're still together as a couple, and we've got 3 amazing kids now. So that without, obviously that's not a full-time occupation, but it's a hell of a part of it. And I was carrying on DJing for about another 10 years after that, and then that parenthood really kind of wound that up as well. Or perhaps I just wasn't any good anymore. I don't know. You never know. It's one of those things. I feel like I walked away from it, but I think in some ways that culture, again, obviously decimated by Corona, but that culture should be for younger people. I mean, I know I'm saying this possibly to the wrong person speaking to you, but...
Well, look, you've got Carl Cox out there. He lives here in Melbourne now, and,
Open Fold. Does he live there?
Yeah, he lives in Frankston in Victoria, yeah.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that. Wow.
Oakie's getting on a bit, and,
is
Sasha and Digweed. I mean, it still happens.
Oh, yes, but those are all big-name people. I'm talking about the kind of because I was always playing sort of deeper, sort of slightly more underground, I suppose, in some respects, and actually that needs to be driven by a different generation of people. I mean, because the people I felt it got to a point where I just felt that the people on the dance floor were all half the age of the DJs, and that was slightly weird.
You feel like a grandfather walking in there sometimes.
Well, no, literally, I played a club in Manchester, and my niece, who was underage anyway, and I managed to get her in to then when she was probably about 17. I mean, she wasn't, horrendously underage, but I remember DJing and looking out and seeing her getting hit on by guys in the club, and I was just like, I can't be here.
Can't watch this.
This isn't right.
Let's talk about the album Happiness. It's the 30th anniversary, and this was the breakthrough album for the band. How quickly was the switch from indie rock band to seminal dance act?
Well, it wasn't. Switch. You see, that's the thing. It's not a switch, is it? It's like it's a process of transformation over a period of time. And one of the great things about having such a huge amount of time elapsed now is that I have a perspective on it that's much more hopefully balanced. I will hold my hand up for the things that I did wrong as well. But we had a 4-piece group, and we were good mates up to a point, but it was directionally trying to please 4 different people and sort of run it as a democracy just was taking it into a kind of territory that wasn't anything that I particularly liked. It was, I didn't dislike it, but it didn't thrill me. And the music that we were listening to, or certainly I was listening to at home, began to be radically different from the kind of music that I was making. And it wasn't a deliberate attempt to sort of sit down and think, okay, I was listening to a lot of early sort of mid-80s New York hip-hop and freestyle kind of, which is that sort of proto-electro Mantronics and Sleeping Bag records, basically.
Arthur Baker stuff, John Roby, that sort of stuff as well?
Yeah, John Roby, Arthur Baker, all the edits by the Latin Rascals, all those kind of things, all those sorts of records, And it obviously, I'm sitting there in my little squat in Camberwell in London making sort of quite rocky indie music, but just thinking, there's no way I could set out to try to make these records because obviously it would be ridiculous, actually. It's not where I'm from, but as the technology became more affordable and began to improve, then people obviously started having access to it. And I think it was just a happy accident that people got hold of or worked in studios, small studios that had technology that was constantly evolving at that time. And you would just go in and see what you could do with it. We were almost like monkeys and typewriters. That kind of, if we hit this button, what's going to happen, blah, 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 blah. And actually realized that we could even sample tiny portions of those records with very, very early samplers. And then, even if you start, let's say, with, it isn't a specific thing, but let's say you get a snare sound off a Run DMC record and put it in the middle of your record. You're not going to sound like Run DMC, but it's the starting point of where you build your sound from. So it's a bit like that. And realizing that we could actually get to the sounds and then put our own stuff on top of it was just a very organic and very simple process. And ultimately, the price that had to be paid in order to make that work was that we lost the drummer and the bass player because that was the weak link. We're the best one in the world. They couldn't play like that. So selfishly, I could already program like that. Therefore, they were kind of expendable. It's a real shame. Tim, who was the bass player, is still a really good friend of mine, and we talk a lot. I probably have a closer social relationship with him than I do with Steve. Yeah, I still work with Steve. It's kind of interesting. So it was. We were good friends, and to have to sort of kick someone out of your band who is a friend is a dreadful thing.
It must have been a very difficult process.
It's a horrible thing to do. It's like a relationship. It really is. It's dreadful. So I'm really pleased that we're still mates. That's actually in itself quite an achievement.
Yeah, so one of the singles that came out right at the end of that indie rock period was a track called Forever Dancing, squarely aimed at the dance floor, obviously. Was that a loop in that record, or was that a sample?
No, it's all programmed. And to be fair, we were all in the studio. All 4 of us were there when we made that record, and we did all contribute to it. I don't know whether they would have sat there thinking, shit, what we're doing here is going to cause my ultimate departure from this project,
Yeah.
And Steve being Steve, Steve is a lovely, lovely man, very, very talented man, but Steve is the least vocal person you're ever going to meet. And so he will always, I know what he's thinking, and he'll let it know what he's thinking, but he'll never do the talking. So I had to be the one. I was the executioner.
Oh, no.
So even though he was in the room when it happened, it was always me. and it's sort of, oh God. And those two moments were actually, kicking people out of the band. It's just etched on my memory as a thing. But as I said, Tim, bless him, totally rationalized it eventually, and his understanding of what happened to the music and what we did afterwards, he's completely cool with it, because it's again, time, perspective gives you that insight, but at the time it's a terribly emotional thing to do. Like I said, it really is like splitting up with a from a long relationship. It's very heavy.
Well, there's no doubt the path you took was the correct path. I mean, Acid House was exploding there in 87, 88 in the UK, and Forever Dancing, and then coming out with Your Love Takes Me Higher. I wanted to talk about the album itself, Happiness, which is getting a 30-year anniversary remaster. It's actually out now in the shops on CD and vinyl. The album sounds great, and I love how Scarlet Beautiful sounds. It sounds so full now. It's amazing.
Brilliant. Okay, well, that's good. I mean, the sheer beauty of the fact is that we'd managed to remaster it. I mean, this was all obviously scheduled quite a long time ago. We just got the mastering done in February, just before the whole world went in, everything went into lockdown. So we had the audio already done. So that was allowed this to actually even happen this year. The 30-year thing is a happy accident. It wasn't actually a sort of planned thing, because we got away from our major deal a few years ago, and so we're with a much smaller independent company now. And at the end of last year, we re-released and remastered a compilation of all the early indie stuff, and so it was just more of a logical next step would be to move on to the next album, which happened to be Happiness, which happened to then fall on a 30-year thing. So weirdly enough, like for instance, we haven't gone out of our way. It doesn't say a sticker on the front 30 years anniversary edition or anything like that, because it isn't. It's not about that exactly. And also, apart from anything else, it means the other ones aren't going to be on their 30th anniversary either. But it was, it's like, oh my God, as a I don't know what to say. I mean, like you're saying, 25 years since I spoke to you, 30. It's a hell of a long time. It's really mad. I'm 55 now. That's more than half my life. That's like, wow.
I would have been 20 when I interviewed you back then, 1995, right. 20 years old.
Yeah, exactly. It's just extraordinary. And what I suppose I'd say about it is that, I haven't spent the interim period listening much to my own music, although, certain tracks come on the radio or whatever every now and again. But it's so to actually have to sort of dive back into it and just think about it and listen to it as a collective little piece of work and everything. I'm really thrilled by it. I don't have a single track on it that I don't like. So that's quite unusual, because I think most people in the end get a bit kind of self-critical about various things they've done, but on this album, I don't.
Well, I did notice you left Loving Feeling off the bonus tracks, and I was going to ask you about that.
You love that song that you do.
I do like
I know, but I don't dislike that song.
You said you did in 95. You definitely did.
No, okay, I'll temper that by saying I dislike what happened to it in the studio.
Ah, okay.
That's a slightly different way of articulating it. Because my experience of recording it was so bitterly unenjoyable, and we were put in with a producer, and we didn't. There was no rapport. There was no, and the direction that he took it was just. You've got to bear in mind that we were recording that song in 1988 when I was going to Shum and spending my weekends, listening to mind-blowing Chicago imports, the lyric. You know the soundtrack that I'd have been listening to.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then going in the studio to make this kind of like very, very saccharine pop record, and I just. It was a million miles. The reason that Acid Love was done and put on the B-side was so that we could just say, Christ, this is actually what we're trying to...
This is what we do, yeah. And, of course, it was the first record for Warner as well, so, there would have been that extra pressure on top.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, and it's just that. It was, I'd waited my whole life, as it were, or obviously as doing music, to get to the point of having a major deal and having this opportunity, but at the same time, having my head turned completely every single time I went to a club by music that I just thought was it. You know what this is, and I've never actually thought about this before. The question is you've led me to this. Is that what it is that prior to that, what we were talking about before. So we're a 4-piece band and we're making music, which I like, but the stuff I'm listening to is better and more exciting. So we start managing to find a way to filter that into it and make Forever Dancing blah blah blah, and we're moving on. But then it happened again. That's what actually happened. So I've reached the point where we're in a kind of loving feeling mode, and I'm kind of getting there. But then again, what I'm listening to then is once more thrilling, more exciting, more dynamic, and I'm stuck with that situation. And we've had to find a way to then, if you like, keep transforming. It's almost as though we signed to Warner's as we were like halfway between Caterpillar and Butterfly, and they didn't realise that we're still going to there's more.
What did they think they were getting with The Beloved when they signed you?
Pretty boy pop. They thought we'd get a poster boy pop group with, to be in Smash Hits and Just 17, and for girls to fold out poster. The sleeve of the 7-inch sleeve has a fold out poster. It's like you can see that in the way that just look at how
you're in front of a fun fair.
The sleeve, the sleeve of the first Your Love Takes Me Higher, which is okay because I kind of like it's so badly designed that I kind of like it. But you compare that to the reissue with the Bob Linney sleeve, and that's the difference. That's the two bands. That's the record company's version on the first release, and that's our version on the second one. Same song, but that even the sleeve makes a huge difference at that point in time, and that's because we were just on this incredible creative roller coasters. It was just amazing. Just every time, always finding new things to push on. This can be better. This can be different. This can be more. And so that whole Love and Feeling thing was just, it in a funny kind of way. It's not. I honestly think if I thought that it would sit anywhere on this CD, I wouldn't have an issue with putting it there. But sonically and
it's very different,
It just is, it's a sore thumb. The whole point is that the second CD that we've done for this is a collection of songs. It's all done in the same studio. We did them all with the same engineer in the same studio over a piece of time. It forms a coherent whole as a second album, and it doesn't include every unreleased mix, and it doesn't include every rarity, and some people will get annoyed about that, and that's just tough because what it actually is a document. It's a kind of a statement of a sketchbook version of what we actually were becoming at that time. So those extraneous bits, the loving feelings, the unreleased mixes of whatever song, they'll have to find a way to put them out at some point because I don't want them just sort of sitting there unheard, because they are valid, but they just don't fit, and Loving Feeling just doesn't on this CD,
So let's have a chat about the bonus tracks on the second disc of the Happiness Special Deluxe Edition. It's really exciting for the fans having all these demos and working versions of songs that we know and love, and hearing how they came together, and hearing those layers that didn't quite make the final mix still in the demo version, things like that. What are some of your favourite bits from this bonus disc?
There's 4 demos of songs that are on Happiness, I think. They are just the rawer, unproduced versions. What they basically show you is the difference that Martin Phillips made as a producer.
Right.
Where on one hand, I'm being maybe less than complimentary about Paul O'Duffy with the way he produced Loving Feeling. What Martin did for Happiness is insanely brilliant, because he was on our wavelength. He just understood what we were trying to do, and he had that same sense of kind of ambition and excitement. So, he made them better. But the difference being is that was still an era when I was writing songs and you would demo the song to see how it sounded, and then you go and do a finished version of it. Whereas now technology means that people don't really do demos that much anymore, because you don't need to. You just have a backup version on your computer and you keep improving it. That's what you do. So the ones that are called demo version on the CD is only because they are songs that are also on Happiness. But those unreleased songs were all demos as well. If you see what I mean, they're all done in the same studio with the same time restrictions, same budget restrictions. So they're not fully produced songs. They are demos as well, and rough things. But I suppose I like all those because I want to see what people think of them. It's quite an interesting idea. I know that they kind of lay us open to slight accusations of being a bit magpie-like in trying to try different styles and different ideas, because they don't really sound the same as some of the songs on Happiness. But I think it's important to say, look, we were just getting so excited all the time by it was like a question of, okay, well, let's try and do a song like this as a starting point. And of course, it ended up somewhere completely different. So there's an extraordinary song on there, Steve, which was mainly written by Steve, called Jackie, Won't You Please Come Home, which is like a song, was us trying to do a kind of torch song from the, I don't know, late 50s, early 60s or something like that, built around a mad drum sample that Steve found, which is exactly what Mark Ronson did with all his Amy Winehouse records, 30 years later. It's the same idea, just define the record by this huge drum sound in the middle of it, and me just trying to, I don't know what I was trying to do, because I don't know that kind of music very well, but it was like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to sing if I'm singing it. And all those songs, it's a bit like having a look inside someone's head, because it's like saying, okay, well, we were still trying to do this, and we still had a residue of our kind of indie past there. There's one song that song called Jennifer Smiles, which I was literally sat down and tried to write a song to sound like a Lloyd Cole song now. Oh, yeah. But I'm still going to acid house clubs when I'm doing that. So what, that's like, okay, it's bizarre. It's just
it's
bizarre,
the world of music. If you love music, you love everything. So
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So Jon, last year you released a Record Store Day 12-inch with a previously unreleased track called Awoke, and also an unheard remix of Your Love Takes Me Higher from the period. How come these weren't released at the time?
No, because, the unreleased mix of Your Love Takes Me Higher, we just found out when we swapped labels and went to New State, the new label, and I was getting everything ready to put everything up on streaming sites and what have you. I just found that I don't remember it. I found several mixes of tracks that I have no memory of, because anything that didn't get used, if it's been on a DAT for 30 years, you've just kind of forgotten about it. When I just listened back to it, it was just exciting because it had a rawness. So the Your Love Takes Me Higher mix was almost like a rough mix done in the studio. I remember doing it. Once we heard it, we worked out exactly when it was and when we did it and why it's exciting. And it was exciting because it's not actually a proper mix. We were just messing around in the studio at the end of the day and ran the 303 live and just were sort of vibing. And, it has there's a few mistakes in it, but it sounds really good because of that.
To me, it sounds like the basis of the Magic Juan Atkins mix.
The genius of the Magic Juan Atkins mix is that all the acid on it was already on the tapes, and everybody always thought that he was really, the reason it sounds like that is because we'd already recorded it all like that, but we hadn't used those bits in the mix.
Yeah.
So, fair play, a remixer listens to the tapes and finds the bits and reconfigures the track, and that's great. Those were our parts, not his parts.
Yeah.
There's also, on that note, there's a fantastic, one of the mixes that we haven't used this time around, mainly because I don't know how many more mixes of Your Love Takes Me Higher the world can actually cope with. It's like, although there are two more to come that are just great, but they're not, then there wasn't room for them here. But there's a Juan Atkins mix. Back in the day, obviously, everything was done off the multi-track tape. There was no stems, no nothing. And so you'd make a copy of the tape, give it to the remixer, they'd go to a different studio and they could record their own bits on top or whatever.
Right.
So his mixes came back, and there's the dub mixes that we used. And he did a vocal mix. But
I wondered why there's no vocal on the A side of
No. So when we recorded the song in the studio, the album version of the song, my vocal in the chorus is double tracked by a backing singer called Leroy Green, who he managed to do an incredibly good facsimile of my voice. So to sort of in the same register, the same tone. So to sort of thicken it on the record, you can't hear it, but it's there somewhere in the mix. Magic Juan Atkins didn't know who was the lead singer and who was his vocal mix. He put Leroy's vocal.
Oh, that's hilarious.
The lead vocal. It's genius. So the verse is me singing, and then it gets to the chorus, and it's someone else. He sings the chorus, Your love, but it's a different man's voice. It's brilliant because at the time, obviously, I was like, oh Christ, we can't use that. But now I'd put it out happily because it's funny. It's musically valid, but it's genius because it's like, what the hell is that? You can tell it's someone else.
Yeah.
But it's sort of tonally similar, but, Anyway, so there's that. Awoke never had a title, and then we had to give it a title to put it out. When me and Steve, we'd started doing demos for what would have been our next album together at the end of 1990, or possibly even early 91. I'm not entirely certain when that was done. And we were with Martin Phillips again around his flat, just doing demos. And I've got a DAT with 5 sketches of tracks, all instrumental at that point, that were done with Martin, and then events intervened afterwards, and we got into terrible difficulty with being sued by 2 different lots of people, and so that's why we stopped working for a long time. And that track was on the DAT, was the only one that was of sufficient audio quality to use in any shape or form. So that's all that is. The reason that isn't anywhere else is that would have been turned into a full song. The way that we used to write is we'd build up a track to an instrumental level like that, and then I would have gone away and written a vocal, and then we'd have started, turning it into, maybe changed the arrangement, whatever. But that is literally the demo sketch version. It sounds great. I mean, it sounds really, really good. All we have is that stereo recording. We can't manipulate it. We can't do anything to it. The only thing that we could do with it is literally overdub on top of that.
Yeah.
Which we could do. I suppose we could do. But you can't change the arrangement, you can't change the balance, you can't change anything about it, because it's a stereo master. That's all we have. But it's a beautiful piece of music. And again, it's all built around samples of classical records. That's why it's so lovely. There's a bit of Stravinsky, there's a bit of Debussy, there's these beautiful, beautiful textured pieces. That's Steve's utter brilliance at being able to spot samples and find a way to recontextualize them so that they become something truly beautiful. That's a real skill set that he always had. He still has it. Just like he hears things, and then because he's such a great musician, he can sort of build other things around them and make them work.
Yeah, the legalities of sampling were a little bit different in 1990 to what they are now, aren't they?
Yeah, well, that's why we got sued.
Yeah, right.
If you Googled Beloved versus Hyperion versus Warner, we're a test case. We are a legal precedent.
Oh, right.
And it cost me a lot of money to be a legal precedent. But that Sunrising sample is a test case, and it got settled out of court in the end, but it's set a legal precedent, and we get cited often now in copyright infringement cases. I refer you to the case of Beloved versus Hyperion versus Warner, so that, I guess that's an achievement. But that was why we stopped working together, because it absolutely paralyzed us. We were just like, oh God, this is dreadful.
Sun Rising remains intact on the album, so you're obviously still allowed to use the vocal.
Oh yeah, no. The upshot was that we were allowed to use it. Obviously, that's what we paid for the rights. I mean, I don't have a problem paying for it.
Yeah,
I don't have any. It's not an ethical consideration. It's just that we had told Warners about the sample, and they told us not to worry about it. And they hung us out to dry because we'd done that, and then we had to pay when we got sued. My deep antipathy towards that record label was set in at that exact moment when I realised that actually when it came down to it, they did nothing to support us. They did nothing. They literally would just exploit us as much as possible, and then if anything went wrong, they would make us culpable. So it's like, okay.
And I expect you were probably in a contract for 3-4 albums, so there's nothing you could do about it either.
Yeah, I'm still beholden to that. Believe it or not, even though I'm now with the new label, I'm still beholden to that contract. It's bloody awful. It's a dreadful situation. That's not New State's fault. It's just the way that it is. It will expire soon, and then I can renegotiate it. But it's just the way it is. There's nothing I can do about it.
All right, so let's listen to some music. We're going to hear a track that is seeing a CD release for the first time, the evening session mix of The Sun Rising. I know there's a story behind this. Can you tell us how this remix came about, John?
Yeah, back in the day, this was actually done around the release of Blissed Out, which was the kind of remix album that came out after Happiness. And because it was a remix album on BBC Radio 1 at the time, there was a DJ called Mark Goodyear who had an evening program. And the whole thrust of this particular episode of the program was I was apparently in the studio remixing the track live over the duration of a 3-hour radio broadcast. So he kept coming back to me and listening to what I was doing to it and talking to me. And then at the end of the program, played this amazing finished remix, completely having, quite drastically remodeled the track. Now, of course, this was the days of analog tape. And every time you wanted to do something, you had to rewind it, you had to find the right point, you had to sync it up, had to keep going. I mean, anyone with the basic understanding of studio technology at the time would have realized it wasn't physically possible to do this. But it worked. We did these drop-ins where it was all pre-recorded. It took me a day to do it, and we'd done these little drop-ins where I was pretending to be adding bits and pieces, and so the broadcast version sounds brilliant. It really does sound as though it works. It's a great piece of radio. And then at the very, very end of it, they played the mix, and they had a competition, and whoever came up with the best title for the mix got an acetate of the mix. So there is one copy somewhere in the world out there of this mix on an acetate, on a vinyl acetate, and that's it. That's the only existing copy anywhere.
Now, did a fan win this at the time on the radio?
Well, someone won it. Yeah. Someone won it, but I don't know that they're much. Certainly, if they're a fan, then they're not a fan sufficiently now to be on the Facebook group or anything, identifying the fact that they have this particular thing, because there's certain people that we know who they are who would play it. I
really hope it survived.
I mean, you just don't know, do you? It's one of those things.
Has it appeared on Discogs as someone owns it?
No. And the worst of it is that the winning mix title was bearing in mind the DJ was called Mark Goodyear, the winning title was the Too Damn Goodyear mix.
Yes.
Ego massage for the DJ. I mean, that always works, doesn't it? It just always works.
Well, let's have a listen to it. This is the evening session mix of Sun Rising with all those hip house samples.
And weirdly enough, I hope we don't get in trouble for it, but another huge vocal sample stuck over the track. We're probably going to get sued again.
Electronique.
That's the Pod Went Pop mix on the original 12-inch of Your Love Takes Me Higher, and I'm speaking with Jon Marsh from The Beloved. Jon, I wanted to ask you about some of those other items that came out around the time of Happiness. There were a whole stack of DJ subscription service remixes at the time, Art of Mix and Rhythm Stick, for instance. They used some of those beloved songs like The Sun Rising and Your Love, and they did some great versions of it. You know, there's a DMC mix, which is fantastic. It kind of siegs the track with Adamski's Killer. Do you have license to those? I mean, could we see a digital compile, for instance, of those versions?
The only ones that might be accessible would be the DMC ones. The other ones, those American Rhythm Stick and all those kind of things, they were literally DJ pools at the time when the labels would give music to a DJ pool who would then service the DJs. And I didn't have any awareness of it whatsoever. And those weren't done from multi-tracks. Those were just literally people took the existing mixes and re-edited them or added little bits and bobs to them. Whereas the DMC ones, I think, were done from multi-track. The DMCs are actual remixes, whereas the other ones are re-edits, if you like. I mean, in answer to the question, I don't think there's enough of them to warrant a release. And also, I never even think about those mixes as being part of my catalogue, actually. They exist in a kind of hinterland, if you like, in my head.
What do you think of the Kelsey mix, though? I really like that. I think they did a great job.
Do you know what? I haven't listened to it for donkey's years. He just uses the Killer bass line, doesn't he?
Pretty much the whole Killer track.
Then that's just like a DJ just playing it in a club and putting two records together, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, I'm holding in my hands a VHS copy of Happiness, the video clips that came out around the time of the album. This is a question that comes up a lot on the forums. Is there a possibility of all of the Beloved video clips ever making their way to DVD or Blu-ray? Do you have the masters? That's the question.
No, we don't, and that's a massive source of disappointment. When we got everything from Warner's huge tape store, there's only one missing item in the entire Warner's tape store, and that was a B-side called Paradise that we had to actually remaster it from the original CD single because we don't have a tape of it. But the video archive is patchy, to say the least, both in its lack of completeness and also quality. It's just dreadful, and it's just one of those things that there's nothing really we can do about it. We got given what we got given, and that's the end of it. And they didn't keep a proper archive of high quality copies of anything. That's where all the money went. You know, that's where our debt comes from, is these videos. We spent a fortune making these videos, a lot of them, and we don't even have an intact archive of them.
So let me guess, they would have sent you a VHS copy, and they should have kept a super VHS or a beta in their archives, and they didn't.
Well, no, they'd have, but they should have even higher quality than that. Yeah. I mean, there's, with the ones that were made by Big TV, who are still friends of mine, they are our best hope of getting the highest quality versions of each of the videos. But even then, over their career trajectory, they've been with numerous different production companies. So it's not like they have high quality, they'd have better quality versions, but they, the original masters, if you like, on some kind of bulky tape format back in the day.
So let's have a chat about the following Beloved albums that came out after Happiness, namely Conscience and X. And of course, the remix collection, Blissed Out. Are we going to see special editions of those as well?
Blissed Out, I don't think so, because A, there's not enough demand for it, really. B, there isn't anything to add to it. Let's just say, if the Happiness thing does better than we expect, then that has validity. But my bugbear with that is that the only obvious thing to do would be to put the full 16-track version on vinyl. Now, that's expensive. The whole point with this remastered Happiness is to split it over two vinyl. You get a much better cut, obviously. I mean, A, they're all just remastered. B, you get less music per side, so a wider cut. On Blissed Out, you can't really do that. You can't put it over 4 pieces of vinyl. That'd be just insanely expensive. And we wouldn't sell enough copies of, if we had a bigger fan base, we have a very loyal fan base, fantastically loyal and really, really enthusiastic, which, is a great source of pleasure to me. But in terms of the numbers, don't stack up to make it worth doing with Blissed Out. What's more likely to happen, if I start talking about this and it doesn't happen, then everyone's going to go, what happened? It's the start of this year, what we would have been doing with the Happiness release is getting new mixes done of tracks from Happiness, because that was always how it was going to be. But the minute that clubs shut, that it kind of negated the point of doing it, as I'm sure is happening with a lot of dance acts and dance labels at the moment. If you've got nowhere to play the music, it kind of, it's what actually are we doing with it? So we have 2 mixes of Sun Rising in the bank already. We've got Luke Solomon did a mix, and Steve's done a mix as well, which is really good.
Oh, wonderful.
Although it needs a bit of tweaking. Then me and Steve have got a very rudimentary mix of songwriting that we also have discussed, and we know what we want to do with it, but we haven't been able to physically be in a room together yet to do it. So there will be mixes of that. Then we might get mixes of some of the other tracks done as well. Now, that would technically, I suppose you could then compile those, and they would be an entirely new version of Bliss Out, if you like. So
that would be really interesting, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Is that we could do a brand new remix album of Happiness would be much more interesting, I think.
Blissed Out too.
Well, yeah, or Strung Out. Yeah.
2020, yeah. Strung Out. Brilliant. I'd love to hear a modernised version of Forever Dancing, for instance, for Blissed Out 2 or whatever name it's
called.
we
had the multis for that as well. Yeah. There is potential to do this. We got all the stems together for this. We went and got all the multi-track tapes and digitized all the audio. We have got all the audio on a massive server. So the mixes could be done, but we did start off at the very start of the year. We approached a couple of people. We got knocked back by the people that we wanted to do it. I was so upset because I knew exactly who I wanted to remix it and felt they would have done absolutely mind-blowing job, and they both said no. But I mean, they were very kind of, they both replied personally by email to me, you know, in a very complimentary, so just saying that it doesn't fit with what we're doing. You know, one said I don't do remixes anymore, which is fine, and the other one said I just haven't got the time and space to do it. Like I said, one of them I have an email relationship with, and it's Dan from Caribou, and I really, really, really wanted him to mix it. I think it would have been just incredible. And then the other one was Kieran from Fortet, and you know, both of whom I think would have done incredible mixes. I've always believed in respecting the wishes of any one artist. You know, when I turned down the Talk mixes donkeys years ago and those kind of things, because ultimately, if you're talking direct to someone who is also a musician or whatever, and they speak their truth, then you respect their truth, you know. That. Some of the tracks that never got remixed properly, I mean, Scarlet Beautiful never had a mix.
Absolutely.
Found never had a mix. Don't You Worry, we did it, but I've never got given to anyone else. So there's a lot of scope for things on there. And even Hello, which I've always felt was the track that could be least contemporized because it's so dated by its lyric. But actually, when we were messing around in remastering and sort of and listening to various versions of it that we had, we didn't realize how if you take the vocal away, the guitar is fantastic. The guitar is not the solo, the actual guitar in the chorus. If you turn it up really loud, it becomes like a sort of mad, like a Beastie Boys record or something like that. Heavy beats underneath it, and you can turn it into something new. But actually, what I think would be the key, although it might upset a few purists, the key is you remix it, you take the names out, just really, really rev it up a bit. It would work.
So I guess this leads us into that inevitable question, and this is kind of a multi-pronged question, Jon. What's next for the band in terms of music production, and what about DJing? Would you be getting back into it at all when restrictions lift?
Okay, quickly. What would have happened this year and may still happen next year is that me and Steve want to do more together. So the current version of the band has gone back to the Mark II version, which is the me and Steve version, although we're not what I would describe as active, but we're not inactive. We're sort of, we get on really, really well. We work together very well and we have a laugh, but we're both old gits now. But what I kind of like about it is that we haven't been pushing this in any shape or form in the interim. You know, it's not like where we've been continually touring or continually putting out substandard albums over a long period of time. You know, we've done nothing. So it's sort of quite an interesting idea that we could, you know, we really, really, considering touring, doing that thing where people play an album, we would have done Happiness.
Yeah.
And so it's not a long set. And maybe, you know, throwing It's All Right Now, maybe throwing Forever Dancing, maybe even throwing Loving Feeling if you're lucky. But we'd have to do Sweet Harmony as an encore, otherwise everyone would go nuts. Yeah. All the people. So that would be quite funny. But I mean, we had started talking about that, and that certainly has legs as an idea. We've also got stuff that we've recorded that's well-recorded songs that we did quite a long time ago now, but because they've never been heard, they're fine. You know, they're not dated. They're not sonically dated because that's kind of not how we ever worked anyway. They kind of just sound like beloved records. We have some irons in the fire, if you like, and that might be the next step. What I don't want to do, going back to a question that I didn't finish answering actually earlier, is that I don't want to immediately go on to doing a remastered Expanded Conscience. That's not going to happen next. Because although New State would like it to happen next, because obviously Sweet Harmony is kind of the biggest thing in our catalogue. It's, you know, it's mind-blowingly bigger than everything else. That obviously has commercial potential at some future point, but I can't cope with spending my entire life just constantly just revisiting what I've done before. DJing is one of those things that I'd love to do again, but like I said, you step off the treadmill, you're not part of the game. I mean, the technology and the way that you can DJ now, allowing you to be musical in the way that you play, if you really get your head around looping and technology and stuff like that.
Sure.
Yeah, but I would need to be going out more. I don't think you can be a DJ if you don't go to clubs.
Immerse yourself in the club scene again, yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's an all or nothing, and I don't know. We'll see how that happens. If someone asked me to play somewhere really good, I would, yes, of course I'd say yes, but I'd probably actually have kittens beforehand because it's one of those things, you know, when I occasionally DJ now, because you're not doing it on a weekly basis, you don't know the music inside out the way you did when you were playing all the time.
Yeah, beat for beat. That's right.
You just don't. Yeah, you just don't. You have to relearn it, and you have to really concentrate and really think about it. Or you end up just playing what you used to play donkeys years ago, and that's not much fun either. So yeah, it's tricky. It's weird. I mean, I didn't realize quite how much energy and effort it was taking from me until I stopped.
Yeah, and the preparation time.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I mean, you're just thinking about it the whole time. Really, you've got a part of your brain is always on, has got an ear out for something or looking for something, which is fine. But if you're not doing that all the time, what I learned most when I stopped was that I started listening to a much broader selection of music again, and that was the thing that I really wouldn't want to give up again, because much as I love house music, I don't really listen to it that much now. If I go out to dance, I love it every bit as much on the dance floor, but I don't really want to sit at home listening to it because it doesn't expand. I like listening to music that is music that I don't know how to make. And that generally isn't electronic, that's the thing.
Well, let's have a listen to one of the pivotal moments in the beloved discography. This is Forever Dancing.
But I see you, so come on, speak to me. Na na na, na na na, na na na, our love will grow. Na na na, na na na, na na na, our love will surely grow. Na na na, na na na, na our love will grow.
Electronique.
That's Time After Time, my favourite song from The Beloved, closely followed by nearly everything on Conscience and Blissed Out. It's so hard to choose. I mentioned this to you back in 1995, John, and it still holds true. Time After Time is an amazing song, and there's a great fan-made remix of it on YouTube. Do you think this would ever see the light of day in some format?
The one that's about 3 hours long. That one.
Yeah. Well, there's a shortened version of it, but there is a 24-minute
I mean,
version.
it's an extraordinary labour of love because I think he has replayed it. It's not just like, he's gone into the track, pulled every part, and then replayed it, which is pretty amazing.
He didn't have
I
the
don't know
stems,
anything
did he?
about. No. I don't know anything about this guy, but it's because he's done. It's just this one song. He's obviously obsessed with
Amazing.
it.
Amazing.
If the source audio isn't of sufficient quality, what you hear on YouTube is obviously quite low bandwidth and everything like that. But you don't know whether the version he's got in his own home studio is even good enough audio quality to ever use in a commercial field. That's the problem.
Yeah.
There's a bootleg mix of Sweet Harmony, the Northern People mix.
Oh, I've got that on 12-inch, yeah, it's great.
Right. Now, that we will probably use, because that's brilliant, and it's sonically great, and it's very different. That, when we finally re-release Sweet Harmony in a few years' time, if we do remixes of it, that will probably get used as part of that package, because it is a brilliant mix.
There's the Stella Does Tricks 12-inch. I mean, whatever happened with that? Could that ever see the light of day, or was that too much of a legal nightmare?
No. A friend of mine who was A&Ring at Manifesto, I think at the time, was he was going to put it out, and we got to the extent of putting 50 white labels out just to test the water, and we were talking with Jam and Spoon about it, because obviously it's built around a huge sample of their track, and then it kind of hit the buffers, and then Mark Spoon died, and that was the end of that. The original artist, one of them died, and then there was no possibility of it ever being used.
Jam Elmar released his own remixes of it a year or two later.
Did he?
Yeah, that's right.
Tell you what is really interesting is that somewhere on YouTube you can find a mashup of that of Stella and Sunrising.
Have to check that one out.
Which is kind of interesting. It's almost works, but yeah.
Gotcha. I'll have a look for it. All right, I've got some fan questions now, and this is the quick fire round, so let's smash through these. First two from Mark Chafe, and he asks in his first question, I see that Mark Fox from Haircut 100 and Rob Gretton, New Order's former manager, are thanked on the album sleeve. How important were these two fellas to you?
Mark Fox was our A&R man. He signed us to Warner's, so he was hugely important. He not only signed the band, he also plays percussion, and he sings some backing vocals on the album. So he managed to get paid at both ends, which is a very shrewd bit of work. Very typical major label behaviour. Really lovely guy, but in the end he became part of the corporate machinery, and he's the one who told us not to worry about the sample on Sunrising. So but
you're still thanking him.
I'd still consider him a friend, but he's the one who's got us into deep shit. So. Yeah. And Rob Gretton, well, when we were a four-piece indie group, even before that, I was a massive New Order fan. When I was like 16 years old, I used to follow them around the country before they were big. And he gave me a lot of support, a lot of encouragement. He also introduced me to our first lawyer, who was New Order's lawyer, who actually proved to be not a great lawyer, because that's why we got such a terrible record contract. But there you go. I hadn't ever thought of that, but that was exactly that, because he was used to dealing with like renegades and factories in India and things like that, and he got absolutely eaten alive by a major label.
Wow.
But he was a lovely bloke, so that's okay. And Rob was fantastic. He was New Order's manager, and we supported them a couple of times. And he was hugely supportive to me when I was young. He really encouraged me. And he died very, very young, a long time ago now as well. I mean, I'm much older now than he was when he died, and that's quite. Actually, I hadn't really thought about that. He was only about 48.
Yeah, he was very young. I saw some footage of him on the New Order Story VHS from years ago. And,
he was such a nice man. Such a nice man.
And such a
really,
character
mate.
as well.
Yeah, his death basically is what caused them to. He held them together, and that was. After he died, that's why they're never going to work as the same unit again.
Okay, second question from Mark Chafe is, you're out in the club, enjoying the night, and a beloved track comes on. What's your reaction, Jon, and do you sing along?
No, but when I went to hear Derek Carter play in London, maybe end of last year, he dropped in a cappella of It's All Right Now over the top of what he was playing, and it freaked me out.
How did he get that?
Well, it's just on the start of the on the Back to Basics mix. He just took the vocal and just looped it, and I didn't know what was going on. It's just genius.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, a few more questions now, and these are from Fleming Jensby, and his first question is, the album title Happiness is Perfect. What other album titles had you discussed at the time?
Oh Lord, I have no recollection whatsoever. I think it chose itself. I think it was self-evident. That was it does what it says on the tin, and that's what the album was about. Yeah.
All right, next question from Fleming is, do you still have any of the synthesizers used for the making of the Happiness album?
Yeah, I've got them all, yeah.
And so what are some of those?
Juno 60, Mini Moog, Prophet VS. The Mini Moog actually on Sunrising is Martin's, but then I got my own one after that.
And final question relating to Happiness, Jon, is from the album Happiness, which track was the most challenging for your voice?
Oh, Sunrising, because it was the hardest one to find a way to sing on top of something so beautiful without taking away from the beauty of the samples. It's the classic Whispering John, isn't it, that one? It's like, it's not really singing, but it's how to find a vocal that would fit without making it sound less beautiful. So that one.
And back then in 1990, recording these vocal tracks, did you do a comp of takes, or was it literally just taking the best take at the time?
No, they're all comps. That's how I still work like that. Then you just sing as quickly as possible, as many times as possible while you're in the zone, and then you just find the best bits. I mean, back in the day, people used to go in and take a bit of a word and drop it in over that kind of level comp, but that's a bit ridiculous. But so I normally would do four takes of a song, and you'll get pretty much the whole song out between the 4 takes, I think.
All right. Well, Jon, it's been an absolute honour chatting to you. Thank you so much. I know there is a very loyal fan base on the Beloved Facebook group page. And for anyone listening who isn't on the page, come and join the conversation. Just search for the Beloved in the Facebook search bar. The special deluxe edition of Happiness is available now. Go and grab yourself a copy on CD or vinyl, or maybe both. And Jon, we look forward to upcoming releases of the next albums in the Beloved discography, no matter how far in the future that may be.
Thank you, Mark. Cool.
This one's going right back to just before the Happiness album was released. This is the Hitman's mix of Acid Love from 1988. Thanks, Jon.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Acid, dream, acid, dream, acid, dream, acid, dream, acid,
Electronique.